Hey guys, it's Logan again. Welcome back to another video tutorial, and today we're going to be talking about arrays more, and more specifically we're going to be building a simple inventory system that will kind of show you and give you more experience with using arrays. So I want to start off by, I deleted everything out of the project if you're following from a previous video. I just have a few icons and I have an object placed in my room and nothing in my object right now. Okay, so how could we use an array? So let's say we had slots, maybe we had inventory slots. We'd have something like slots, and maybe we had 10 different slots. Well, this is actually 11 with the way Gamemaker does. This is 10 different slots. And they're all set to 0. Okay, so this is initialization. And let's say we had some kind of item, and remember we can store items with different attributes. So let's say we have an item stored at 0, and its first attribute, which is denoted by the second number, is going to be its name. So let's say it's a sword. This is a string that it would display. Or an item 0, and let's say 1 for its second identifier is, or its second index is its sprite index. So it'd be S icon sword. That could be a sprite. And then let's give it one more attribute. Go one step further, and this would be, let's say, is this item equipable? Or we could actually give this different attributes. Let's say, is it equipable? And I'll just use a string for now. Equipable, yeah, so I think I'm thinking of this right. So this item would be equipable. We could also have usable, which is an item that you just use, like a potion, but a sword is equipable, it's not usable, right? So we give it the equipable tag, okay? Now, let's say we wanted to store this item in our slot. How could we do this? Well, all of our slots are 0 right now. Let's actually make them -1. Okay, because we'd never have an index. I'll explain it in a second. But let's say we wanted to store, everything's -1 in our slots. All of our slots have -1 as their value. We wanted to store the sword in our slot. Well, we could simply do slot 0. This was our first index. And we could have it equal 0. Now, does that make sense to you? Maybe not. How do you access the sword from this? Well, if you notice, the 0 is just our item, or our index. And we already know these are always going to be constant right here. The 0, 1, and 2, the 0 is always going to be the string, the name of the item. The 1's always going to be the sprite, and the 2 is always going to be its usability or equipability. So if we can just index which item we want to see, then we can now say, let's say we could say like display icon equals item, and then we could actually use slot 0 in for this. Okay, we could actually say slot 0, and that is going to grab 0. It's going to return 0, which is going to correspond to our sword. And then we give it 1 because of our sprite index. And I want you to pause this and process this a little bit, code from top to bottom, and see exactly how this is working. You can put an array inside of an array, because this array is going to return the number 0. It's going to access the item at index 0. So item, this is the exact same as writing this at this point. Okay, so it's setting display icon to S icon sword. Okay, let's take it one step further and make a second item and call it potion. And we'll call it usable. And we wanted a display icon to equal whatever, maybe this icon. Well, we could store our potion, or a potion, inside of our second slot. I got to change the first index. And now slot 1 is going to return 1. So we could do slot 1, 1. And now this display icon is set to sicon sword because this returned 1. Okay, so I know this is a little bit confusing. Try to digest as much as you want, as you can. I'm going to simplify this by using enumerations. And I know we're taking in a lot of info right now. Don't sweat it if you don't fully understand yet. It's kind of hard to visualize with these different numbers, okay? But we can use what we call enumerations. An enumeration is something kind of like if you wanted to identify something by number, it's kind of like a constant, okay? So the first thing we could do is macros. We have macro, and we could write sword and give it a value of 1, okay? This is one way to define macros, okay? And then sword now always equals 1. It's a constant. So we could write sword, or let's put 0 here instead. So we could write sword here, and it is the same as saying what we had previously. But now this item index is always going to equal sword. Okay, so sword equals 0. This is a way we don't have to get confused with, oh, I don't remember what index 0 was. We know what it is because we assigned the keyword sword. So you can use macros, but there's one other thing that we can use. We can use enumerations, and we can declare an enumeration as like this. We can use enum, stands for enumeration. Then we give it a name. We give it, let's say, what do we want this to be? Item type. I'm going to use item T for shorthand for item type. And then we give it the double braces. And an enumeration is global. We could initialize this in like our game controller when it first starts the game, and then this will always be available, these values. So all we have to do here is say we have a type sword, comma, we can give it a space. What other types could we have? Potion, comma, and what's here? Armor, okay? Awesome. That's all we have to do. These will automatically be assigned. Usually it starts 0, 1, 2, like that. And it's not guaranteed that's like that, but most of the time it will be like that. But the important thing is that all of these values will be different. So we don't know what numeric value they are. I mean, like I said, 0, 1, 2 is pretty standard, but the important part is that we know that they're different, okay? They're always going to be different. But you can assign them values if you want to be 100% sure. And I'm pretty positive Gamemaker always does 0, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So you can assign these like that, but I'm going to trust Gamemaker to do what it needs to do to make it 0, 1, 2. And you could keep going on with this forever. Item, you keep going. Just keep using comma. Now, how do we use these enumerations? Well, as I said, this could be global. So anything I write now is going to be the same as it would, even if this code was not in this object, okay? Even if it was in a different object. But we can say item t dot sword. And that's going to return a value. So we can actually test that value. I'm going to keep all this code down here. I'm just going to do a show message to show us the message and turn this into a string value. So it's going to turn basically an integer into a string. I'm going to hit play, and hopefully I don't get any errors. And it should show me 0, I would think. Okay, see? It shows me 0. Now what if we change... I do have an error. It's okay. What if we change potion? It's a potion. Item t dot potion. We should see 1. I deleted. Yeah, I should see 1 now. This is just a demonstration. Okay, so I see 1. So how can we use this in conjunction with our inventory system? Oh, it's giving me an error because I deleted the sword constant. But we can use this in conjunction with the inventory system by making our sword item t dot sword. And I know it's a little bit long, and you might shorthand something else. Use like, I don't know what you could use that would be shorter. I know that these are a little bit long, but it still gives you better organization. And then for this item, we could use item t dot potion. And we'd use this for all three of these. There we go. Now we have the exact same thing we had prior, but we've now named these. Now we can make a separate enumeration. So I'm going to copy paste this enumeration to give us the format. And we could use, we could do the same thing for these, because we always want to know this is the name. We always want to know this is the sprite. We always want to know that 2 is, I don't know what you would call that. Let's see. What could I name this? We could name it iProperty. So I'm going to name this iType, actually. And then iProperty. That's going to stand for item or inventory, you could say. iType. I'm going to copy paste this down. Do all these. And then for the second slot, let me increase the font size for you guys, sorry. And actually maximize this. So we have our iType and our iProperty. And what different properties do we have? We have name, we have icon, which is going to be a sprite image, and then we have usable. I know that doesn't make sense. That'd be more like true or false. Let's see. Action. Maybe action will be what we call it. So then we could replace these zeros, ones, and twos with iProperty.name, iProperty.icon, and iProperty.action. I know this is a lot to type out, but look how much more organized this is now. You could also, like I said, you could do macros or constants where it's just the one word and you could just make capitals. And that might be better for you, but enumerations are usually pretty, they're pretty decent to work with. So you would just do this exact same thing for down here. Okay. And now we could store, let's say slot 0, we picked up a sword. Well, we could store sword by using iType.sword. And then this one we could use iType.potion. And that stores 0 for our slot 0. And it stores 1 for our slot 1. And then it will print it out right here. And then we could say we want to show our iProperty.icon. Our iProperty.icon here as well. Okay, hopefully that's kind of making sense, but now let's organize this stuff in a way that you could actually use it. Okay, so let's make some scripts. The first script I'm going to create, I'm going to call initialize inventory. I spelled that totally wrong. Inventory. And then I'm going to put our enumerations in there, first of all. And you might even call this in a separate script, because you can imagine you could have a ton of different items, right? And it does eat up a little bit of memory, but I mean, the item types have to be stored somewhere. So if you had 100 different items, it's going to be some memory that you take. Maybe a better way to do it, I don't know if you can do this, I haven't tried it, would be to use a JSON file. We'll go over JSON later on. I don't know if you'd be able to load enumerations from JSON, but these are just going to be integers, so hopefully, I mean, Gamemaker stores them as devils. They're going to take up a bit of memory, so that's just how it is. One of the things that we have to deal with Gamemaker. Okay, so now we have our enumeration set. The other thing we need to do is set up item types. So I'm going to paste this in here for now, and let's make a new script and call it initialize items. And initialize items is just going to be where we paste this stuff in. This is going to literally initialize init all of our items. Awesome. Okay, and this is where you would store item after item. Okay, so you would have to set up the properties for your items. You could have other fields, guys. Let's say you wanted another property type. Let's say damage. Then you could go in here and set up like your sword, iProperty damage to be, let's say 10. Okay. And now your sword has a damage property of 10. Well, potion doesn't have damage, so I copy and paste down here. In those cases, that's when I would use stuff like -1 or a number that's never going to be used in your damage scale. Then when you're doing checks, you could say, if this property's damage is not equal to -1, then I execute the code, or else I know it's not a damageable item or a damaging item, okay? And then let's say, there's other ways you could actually do this. You could actually, this is one way that constants would work well, is if you were making, let's say, using the macro again, you use macro, and you could say damage equals what, 3, and then you could make another macro and say defense equals 3. So these would both be the same. And now when you went to, you could put damage in here, right? And then let's say in the case of a, this should be armor. Armor. In the case of armor, you could use defense. Okay? And then you would set a defensive thing, which that may work for you. That's one way of kind of going about it. But in general, this way is the way to go. You'll have to find ways around figuring out if an item is where its attributes are at. Okay? I'm trying to explain this in a better way. Dot damage. Maybe you could have a property that says, you could say, what type of item is it? So let's try this real quick. Let's say type, and maybe for type you'd have another enumeration. Okay, so let's say, well, we have type, but I mean maybe it's how it's used. I'll just say how used, and then here you could put like a defense, attack, or offense. Maybe this is where you do your equipable or your usable. So you could have all these different uses, and that's where you could put in here. You could do I how use dot equipable. Is that right? How used. So how used dot equipable. So you could actually assign an enumerator inside of this, if that makes any sense. Okay. Enough of that. I've kind of beat that to death. So let's move on with our basic inventory system. So now we set up all the items that your game's going to have in here. Okay. So there's tons of different items basically in an item array. And we have our initialize inventory that we need to call the initialize item script. Initialize items. Okay. And let's see. You could actually kind of add these as you went as well. You don't have to initialize every item on the go. Maybe you'd have a script that you could call that you could add an item by setting up this stuff at real time. So when the user picks up a sword, then it runs this code, right? So then it's not stored in memory from the very beginning. And you can actually clear out everything that's stored in here by setting all of these to 0 once again. That'll actually clear out the memory, I believe. I read somewhere. Not certain, but you could. Okay, so now we've initialized our enumerations. We've initialized our different item types. Now, now let's go back to our code. We have 10 slots, all set to -1, and then we have 0 and 1. Our 0 and 1 slot we have assigned as swords and potions. I know we haven't went over DS lists yet, really. I'm going to go over that in the future, and that might be a better way than using a one-dimensional array right here, because you can add more. You can add more slots and stuff later. I mean, you can with this too, but DS lists allow you to do things like shuffling and sorting, that kind of thing, which might be good if you want to sort your items and stuff. Or there's all kinds of different data structures that we could use, but for now, I guess we'll go ahead, since this is an array video, we'll go ahead and use this. Okay, so I know we haven't got anywhere, but I wanted to explain this stuff in detail, so let's go ahead and get really into it. Okay, so we've now assigned our slot 0 to sword, our slot 1 to potion. Now let's go ahead and assign slot 2 and 3. Let's assign slot 2 to armor, and assign slot 3 to, let's say empty. Let's make an empty item slot, because you will have empty item slots, right? So, oh crap, what did I do? So you will have empty item slots. So let's make a type of item empty, and maybe this would be our first type, empty. Okay, and then we'd have to go to initialize items and create an empty slot, basically. So I type empty. I'm gonna copy paste this down. And then we have our same name. Our name's gonna be an empty string. Icon's gonna be -1. Empty string for action. And again, for actions, you could make it another enumeration for equipable or usable. I wouldn't use a string. It's always better to use enumerations and compare numbers instead of strings. So you'd make another enumeration for equipable and usable. Okay, and let's use our action will just be -1. Our damage will be -1. And this will be our empty slot. So you could check, you could run through with a for loop or something, your different items or your different slots and say, if the slot, I guess, is not equal to empty, then you execute your code. So these values don't necessarily do anything. I'd honestly probably use -1 for even the name, because you can. Okay, so let's go back to our object. All right, so we have now set our slot 3 to empty. Now let's run through, let's use a for loop. I'm gonna use I equals 0, I is less than, let's just do 4 for now, I ++. So I'm just gonna run through the items that we have. Now what you would do in reality is you would keep track of how many items you have, okay? So your basically current item count you could, or you could use a while loop. You could say while, I don't know if we've went over while loops, but you'd use while, basically slot I is not equal to I type dot empty, then you will execute this code. And when it comes to like this spot, this is if you're keeping your stuff in order. So we'll have to go through that when I make an actual inventory video, how to kind of keep a stack of your items. So there's not an empty space and then a new item, if that's how you wanted to set it up anyways. So while our slots I is not empty, we're gonna set var I t equals 0 here before we start this loop. And then we're gonna do show message, let's see, string. Oh, let's say, I'm gonna use double quotation and say name, space, and then plus, we're gonna say slot item, and then we insert slot I here for our index, and our name we know is at index 0. And then we won't actually use 0, we'll use I property dot name. And I know it's quite long, but it makes sense if you go through it, okay? And then I'm going to do a plus, and I'm going to go to the next line, and we're going to show more. We actually need a space before this string, and we'll say, what is our second value? We have name, icon, action, damage. Okay, so we probably aren't going to do the display icon thing, but let's do name, action. We'll say action, and then I'll do plus item slot I, comma, I property dot action. And I'll just leave it at these two, kind of to, well, let's display the damage as well. And we're gonna have to turn this into a string actually, because this one is not a string. Remember, it's a, wait, it is a string. We have it as a string for now, so we don't have to do that. I'm gonna use plus and go down, space. We have action, let's say damage, and we're gonna do the same thing. Item, slot, I property dot damage. Okay. And then we're gonna have to turn this one into a string by using the string function. This is gonna convert the integer value into a string and be able to display it for us. So we're gonna show a message with our name, our action, and our damage, and it's gonna go through slot one at a time until it hits empty, and then it's no longer going to work because this loop's gonna exit. But before we do that, we actually need to increment I at the end of this. So we're gonna do I plus plus, so each time this iterates, I gets increased, okay? And let's hit play, and hopefully if all is good, it will work. Okay, trying to index a variable which is not an array. I property name, slot I, trying to index slot I is 0. We go until slot I is empty, item.empty, I property name. Oh, we didn't call initialize inventory. Sorry guys. We have to use initialize inventory up here at the top. So this is going to set all of our values and create our slot array. And if you're using initialize inventory in a different object, you'll have to reference that object before using slot to be able to grab it, or use global variables. Okay, so we have our first name, sword, action, equipable, damage 10. Okay, and then name, potion, action, usable, damage -1. You'll see that we have it up here. Name, potion, didn't we just go through this one? Damage 10. Armor, slot 2, armor. Should it not have shown armor? Or did we not change the values in the armor item? Let me see. Let's go back to our initialize items, and then we have our armor. Oh yeah, we didn't change the names and stuff. So armor, this is equipable. Didn't spell that right. Damage 10. Potion doesn't have damage. Now let's hit play, and we should see sword, action, equipable, damage 10. Potion, action, usable, damage -1. Armor, action, equipable, damage 10. Oh, it should be not have a damage as well. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and you can kind of see how enumerations are really useful for keeping track of numeric values. And yeah, I am pretty happy with that. I believe I saw a on the Reddit. I'm gonna try to grab the link. He might use a similar system as this. I just glanced through the video and I saw enumerations were used. So it could be a similar system, and it might expand on this for you. And this might give you kind of a base understanding to kind of enter that video. I'm gonna link that down below if I can find it again. But yeah, this is a basic system. Just for a brief overview one more time, I know the video is quite long, but there's kind of a lot that we went over, is you can store indexes for other arrays inside of an array. That's what we did here. You can actually store arrays inside of arrays, but we aren't going to worry about that. So we just basically are storing 0, 1, 2, 3 as our values for our slots. And with these slots, we're grabbing the type of item by using 0, 1, 2, or 3. And we don't ever have to worry about what the actual number is as long as we hold an enumeration, because these are numeric values that we don't have to worry about, because Gamemaker is going to say 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Those stand for what they stand for, and all we have to do is do this. And if you want easier ways to access them, which I don't recommend, you could use like IT, IP, if you can remember it, your actual names. So that's one way to do it. One more thing I'll leave you at is if you wanted stackable items. I think I heard that video talking about it. Please go watch it if you're interested in making a inventory system. Is you could have a property that is stackable, and if you could set it to true or false. And if it is stackable, you could execute some other code and have another enumeration that could be stack count, which would be like a maximum amount that you could have. And you could use all these properties to manipulate your inventory system. And I hope that makes sense. You could add as many properties as you needed for items, and you just have to work around, let's say, if my item's equipable, then I want to execute the rest of this code. If not, then I don't. Another thing, again, instead of equipable, I would use another enumeration for this. And what this allows you to do is cycle through like with for loops and say, I want to grab all my equipable items and put them under like this category, and then grab all my usable items and put them under this category. And it kind of works like that. So hope this makes a little bit of sense. I am going to create a more in-depth guide on an inventory system where we're actually adding items and our slots are managing and moving around. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.